Hi, friends. Today we're going to read a story called Fancy Francie and Her Magnificent Tail. Mommy, look! That dog just had puppies. Can we adopt one? Please, please, please. Yes, Sophie, we can adopt a puppy, but remember, it's a big responsibility. When you adopt a dog, they're a friend for life. I know, Mama. Can we take one home, please? Yes, you may, as long as you take care of the puppy. Sophie looked at all of the puppies, trying to decide which one she wanted. There was a wiggly puppy, a barky puppy, and a soft and licky puppy. But the puppy Sophie adored was the puppy with the extra long tail. I like this puppy, Mama. I will name her Francie. Look at Francie's tail. My goodness, it's so long. As Sophie and Francie both grew, they were inseparable. Sophie told Francie everything while Francie listened very carefully, and they both loved fashion. Sophie put hats, necklaces, and even skirts on Francie. Oh, and that tail was something. You see, even though Francie was a typical size, her tail was not. Her tail grew and grew and grew until it was extra long and extra furry. It was truly an extraordinary tail. Sophie loved Francie. Her tail made their playtime even more fun. When Sophie dressed Francie, she always added a big, colorful bow at the end of her tail. Then she would say, "See, Francie? Now you are fancy just like me." One day, Sophie and her mom decided to take Francie to the park for a picnic and meet the other dogs. Francie was so excited she wagged her big, long, furry tail and swept everything off the table. Food, toys, dishes went everywhere. Sophie's mom said sharply, "Francie, watch that tail." After the picnic, Sophie encouraged Francie to meet the other dogs while she met new kids. The kids said to Sophie, "What's with your dog's extra long tail? That's weird." Then they all laughed. Sophie felt very bad. She loved Francie very much. Francie's tail didn't matter to Sophie. It was unique, just like Francie. As Sophie met the kids, Francie pranced over to the dogs and introduced herself. They looked at her and laughed. The big black and white spotted dog said, "What's with that tail? You look like a squirrel." "Francie's a squirrel." All the dogs laughed. "We don't play with squirrels, only dogs." Francie put her tail between her legs and ran over to Sophie. Sophie petted her and said, "I hope those dogs were nice to you. The kids weren't very nice. Let's dress up and show off your amazing tail." Francie agreed. She knew her tail was different than the other dogs' tails, but she was proud of it. And so was Sophie. After all, Sophie tied a bow on it nearly every day. Sophie called her Fancy Francie. They just needed to understand. The next day, Sophie and Francie dressed up and went back to the park. The same kids and the same dogs said even worse things. "Now you've got ribbons on your tail. Shouldn't you hide it, not decorate it?" Then they laughed and ran away. Sophie and Francie went home. Francie was sad and felt just terrible about her tail. She tried tucking it, hiding it, and even curling it, but nothing helped. She had a very, very long, very, very furry tail. Sophie and Francie continued to play dress up, but they never went to that park again. Sophie would tie a ribbon at the end of Francie's tail every day and say, "Fancy Francie, I love you. You are a special dog. This ribbon will remind you that you have a terrific tail." Francie never quite believed her, but would wag her tail and lick Sophie. She loved Sophie very much. A few years went by. Francie stayed home while Sophie went to school, but they still played together and were very close. Sophie continued to tie a big, colorful bow on Francie's tail every single day. One day, there was a terrible snowstorm. The snow had come down very, very quickly. Francie saw Sophie's mother and father talking worriedly, and then they left in a hurry. Francie knew something was wrong. Where was Sophie? She should be home by now. Francie realized Sophie was missing. Francie pushed open the back door. She knew she wasn't supposed to go outside, and she was scared when she saw the snow. But Francie knew she had to find Sophie. Francie ran everywhere. She ran to the creek, into the forest, over the hill. Francie was so small, she could only see white snow everywhere, but she just kept looking and looking. Finally, she heard a shout. It sounded like Sophie. It was Sophie. Sophie rushed up to her. "Francie, Francie, you found us. Or we found you. We couldn't see anything. We couldn't find our way back. Then we saw your tail with the red ribbon on it. Francie, you're our hero." See, over all the white snow, they can see Francie's tail. Francie, Sophie, and the children and their dogs trekked home with Francie's tail leading the way. The parents were so happy and relieved to see their children safe. Everyone hugged and kissed them. Francie was shivering and shaking, but was very happy to have found Sophie. The parents exclaimed, "Fancy, Francie, you have a wonderful, amazing tail. It saved our children." Now, when Sophie and Francie went to the park, the other kids and dogs were happy to play with them. Fancy Francie finally believed her tail truly was magnificent.